When the auction ended, only the untamable alien girl remained. One human bought her HFY sci-fi story. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The auction hall was alive with the murmurs of eager bidders, all focused on the lone remaining figure standing at the center of the stage. A tall, stunning alien girl with skin like shimmering silver and hair that cascaded in waves of pure white. Zara stood motionless, her gaze locked on the crowd, her body language exuding both defiance and allure. Her appearance was striking, but it was the fire in her eyes that made her truly untamable. She had been up for auction for hours, her fate in the hands of the highest bidder, but she hadn't been sold. Not until now. Most had already turned their attention elsewhere, but one man, Jack Porter, stood out among them. Jack, a man who'd never really been interested in luxury or rare collectibles, found himself drawn to this alien girl, her strength, her wild spirit. Something about her made him feel alive in a way he couldn't explain. When the auctioneer announced that there was only one lot left, Zara, he felt something stir inside him. Not just desire, but an inexplicable pull. As the bidding intensified, Jack knew he had to act. He raised his paddle, not to buy some exotic item, but to make a choice that would change his life. 1,000,000 credits, Jack said, his voice calm, a stark contrast to the chaos around him. The auctioneer's eyes widened, but the room fell silent. The price was high, but Jack wasn't here to haggle. He was here for something else. The auctioneer's gavel came down, and Zara was his. The crowd erupted into a mix of applause and whispers, but Jack barely noticed. His focus was entirely on Zara, who stood there, still unmoving, as though waiting for her new owner to make his next move. As the other bidders cleared out, Zara stepped down from the platform and met Jack's eyes for the first time. She didn't speak, but the intensity of her gaze said everything. She wasn't impressed. She wasn't intimidated. But there was something else, something Jack could only describe as curiosity. And that, in that moment, was all he needed. "Follow me," Jack said, his voice soft but firm. Zara didn't resist, but the challenge in her eyes never faded. She had been through this before, too many times to count. She wasn't some object to be owned. And Jack knew that. As they walked towards the exit, the weight of the situation settled over him. He had just bought a living, breathing being, a creature of another world. And he didn't know what came next. Zara, for all her beauty, had a history, a past filled with struggle, and Jack had no illusions about what he'd just walked into. But for the first time in his life, he felt like he was ready to face something unknown, to take on a challenge that would push him in ways he'd never imagined. As the two of them stepped out into the cold night air, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that he hadn't just purchased an alien girl. No, he had bought a future, one that was far more complicated than he ever expected. But what was it about Zara that made him feel like he was about to embark on the adventure of a lifetime? And what would happen when her untamable spirit met the most unexpected of forces, humanity? Let's find out together. The night air was cold as Jack and Zara stepped into the sleek, metallic interior of his ship, the Starborn. The hum of the engines was a welcome contrast to the chaotic atmosphere of the auction hall, and for a moment, Jack allowed himself to relax. The deal was done, and Zara was his responsibility now. But what exactly did that mean? He didn't have much time to consider that question before Zara broke the silence. "You know nothing about me," she said, her voice low but full of authority. "You've bought a weapon, not a pet." Jack turned to face her, his brow furrowed. "I didn't buy you to tame you," he replied, his voice calm. "I bought you because I know you're more than just a weapon. I'm not interested in controlling you. I don't think you'll make it easy for me anyway." Zara's eyes flashed with something between challenge and amusement. "You're not the first to think that. But no one has ever managed to break me," she said, her words heavy with the weight of past failures. Jack paused, studying her face, the fierce determination in her expression. "I don't plan to break you," he said finally. "I just want to know what kind of person you are. What's your story?" Zara's gaze softened, just for a moment, before the walls went back up. She seemed to weigh his words, and for a split second, Jack thought she might actually tell him. But then, she spoke again, her voice colder this time. I'm not your charity case. Don't expect me to thank you for saving me from that auction. Jack could see the wall she had built, the way she kept everyone at a distance. It wasn't surprising, considering what she had been through. I don't expect thanks, he said quietly. But I do expect that we figure out how to make this work. I'm not taking you back to some research lab or using you like an experiment. You're free to do whatever you want, but we need to talk about the next steps. Zara snorted softly. The next steps? You think this is some kind of partnership? You've bought me like some kind of collectible, Jack. You have no idea what you're getting into. Her words stung, but Jack wasn't deterred. I know exactly what I'm getting into, and that's why I'm giving you a choice. You don't have to be here. You're free to leave anytime. He could see her tense at that, her posture shifting, as if considering his offer. But after a long moment, she shook her head. Where would I go? She asked, a hint of bitterness in her voice. I don't have a home anymore. The only thing I've ever known is survival. And you're not the first to try and change that. Jack's expression softened. Maybe not. But I'm different. I'm not here to change you, Zara. I'm here to help you get out of whatever hell you're running from. For a moment, neither of them said anything. The tension between them was palpable, but there was an unspoken understanding. Both of them were stuck in this together, for better or worse. Jack finally broke the silence. I need your help, too. I didn't just buy you because you're strong and beautiful. I need you because you're exactly what I need for the mission ahead. Zara's eyes narrowed, but she didn't ask. Instead, she took a step closer to him. I'll help you, she said slowly. But only because I don't trust you enough to leave. For now, we work together. Jack nodded, a sense of relief washing over him. This was the first step, the beginning of whatever strange alliance they were about to form. As he led Zara through the ship, showing her to her quarters, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. He had no idea what lay ahead, but one thing was certain. Zara wasn't going to be easy to tame. And that was exactly why he needed her. The mission was bigger than either of them, and whatever came next, they were going to have to face it together. The days following their unexpected alliance were filled with tension, each moment a delicate balance between cooperation and suspicion. Jack found himself more and more drawn to Zara, not just because of her strength, but because of the complexity in her eyes, the walls she kept up so fiercely. He had a mission to complete, but in the back of his mind, he couldn't help but wonder what her story was. What kind of life had led her to this point? Despite his own questions, Jack knew one thing for sure. He couldn't do this mission without her. They had to work together, no matter how difficult or dangerous that proved to be. Zara, however, was far less enthusiastic about their arrangement. She was still a prisoner in her own way, shackled not by chains, but by the promise Jack had made, an unspoken agreement to see this through. As much as she tried to push him away, Jack's persistence was wearing her down. She couldn't deny that there was something different about him, something that set him apart from the others who had tried to control her. She wasn't sure what it was yet, but every day, it became a little clearer. The mission Jack had signed up for was dangerous, more so than he had let on. They were headed to a planet at the edge of the galaxy, a hostile world known for its deadly fauna and merciless inhabitants. Zara had been there before, as part of a raid that had gone horribly wrong. She had escaped, but many of her comrades hadn't. The scars, both physical and emotional, still lingered. Jack had read the reports, of course, but they didn't capture the full picture. They didn't tell him what it was like to face the kind of enemies that didn't just kill. You had to survive them, every minute, every hour. As they prepared for the mission ahead, the ship's systems hummed quietly, the only sound breaking the silence between them. Jack was deep in thought, reviewing their route one last time, while Zara sat across from him, her arms crossed, her face unreadable. It was clear she didn't trust him yet, but Jack knew this was the only way forward. You've been to that planet before, Jack said, breaking the silence. I need to know everything. The terrain, the wildlife, the people. I don't want any surprises. Zara's eyes flickered up to meet his, but she didn't answer right away. She was calculating, assessing him. The planet's not something you can prepare for, she said finally. You learn as you go. The wildlife is unpredictable. Some of it's lethal, but most of it just wants to be left alone. The people, though, they're a different story. Mercenaries, bandits, outcasts. They don't take kindly to outsiders. Jack nodded, taking in her words. He had suspected as much. This was a mission that would test them both. But he had one advantage, the element of surprise. He had intelligence the mercenaries didn't. And he had Zara. "We'll make it work," he said, his voice steady. "We have to." Zara's expression softened, just for a moment. She looked at him as though seeing him for the first time. "You're not like the others," she said quietly. "Most people would have turned me over to the highest bidder, or used me as some kind of weapon. But you really think we can survive this together?" Jack met her gaze without hesitation. "I don't know what the future holds, Zara. But I do know one thing. We're not in this alone. We're in this together. And that means everything." For the first time, Zara didn't respond with defiance. She didn't argue, didn't try to push him away. Instead, she nodded slowly, acknowledging what was unspoken between them. She was still the untamable alien girl who had been sold at auction, but now, she was something else, something more complicated, something that Jack had yet to fully understand. And maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning of something neither of them expected. The journey to the hostile planet was long. The hum of the engines and the rhythmic beeping of the ship's instruments the only sounds that accompanied Jack and Zara as they moved through the empty corridors of the Starborn. The tension was palpable between them, but a sense of understanding was beginning to form. Jack wasn't sure exactly what had shifted, but something in Zara's posture had softened. She still wasn't ready to trust him fully, but she wasn't pushing him away anymore. She was beginning to accept that they were in this together, whether she liked it or not. "We'll be entering the atmosphere soon," Jack said, breaking the silence. His voice was calm, but underneath it, there was an edge of urgency. Zara didn't respond immediately, her eyes focused on the view screen, where the planet's surface loomed large in the distance, an alien landscape of jagged mountains and deep, dark forests. "You've never been to this part of the world," she said, her voice low, almost to herself. Jack glanced at her, catching the faintest hint of concern in her tone. "No, I haven't. I've studied the maps, but you can't prepare for everything." Zara's lips curled into something between a smile and a grimace. "No, you can't," she said. There was a long pause. Then she stood up and walked toward the cargo hold. Jack followed her, his curiosity piqued. Zara moved with a kind of fluid grace, her presence commanding, even in the confined space of the ship. As she opened the cargo bay door, Jack saw the equipment that had been loaded onto the ship, survival gear, weapons, and a few supplies. Zara moved with purpose, grabbing a small pack. "You'll need to carry this," she said, holding it out to Jack. "It has the essentials for the next few days. Water, food, first aid. You'll need it." Jack took the pack, his eyes meeting hers. "Thanks," he said, his voice sincere. For a moment, their gazes locked, and for the first time, Jack saw something in Zara's eyes that wasn't just cold detachment. It was a flicker of something deeper, something she wasn't ready to show. She turned away quickly, hiding whatever vulnerability had momentarily broken through her defenses. As they made their way to the drop zone, Jack couldn't help but notice the tension in Zara's movements. She was ready for battle, alert, but there was a vulnerability in her that she was clearly trying to keep hidden. He respected that, in a way. They were both survivors, each carrying their own burdens, their own ghosts. As the ship descended, the roar of the atmosphere outside grew louder, shaking the vessel. Jack's grip tightened around the handle of his rifle, the weight of the mission settling over him. They had one chance to make this work. There was no turning back now. The ship finally touched down with a jolt, the landing gear absorbing the impact with a loud hiss. Zara was already moving, her sharp gaze scanning the terrain outside the ship's viewports. "We're here," she said, her voice steady but carrying the weight of the moment. Jack followed her, stepping off the ship into the thick, humid air of the alien planet. The ground was rocky, uneven, and the sky above was filled with dark clouds that threatened rain at any moment. Zara moved quickly, her eyes constantly scanning the area as she led the way. Jack could feel the weight of the atmosphere pressing down on him, the air thick with moisture and the smell of the planet's dense vegetation. He could tell that this place was far from welcoming, but he had come here for a reason. They had a mission to complete, and nothing was going to stop them. As they moved deeper into the wilderness, the sounds of the planet grew louder. The shrill cries of strange creatures echoed through the trees, and the distant rumble of thunder warned of an incoming storm. Jack kept pace with Zara, following her lead as she navigated the rugged terrain with ease. He couldn't help but admire her skills, her knowledge of this planet, the way she moved as though she had lived here her whole life. She had become more than just a tool in his mission. She was his guide, his partner, and in that moment, he realized just how much he was beginning to rely on her. Zara didn't speak as they moved, her focus on the path ahead, but Jack could feel the unspoken bond between them growing stronger. He had never expected this partnership, this shared journey, but he knew one thing. For sure, they were in this together, for better or worse. And when the storm finally broke, the first flash of lightning illuminating the sky, Jack knew there was no turning back. They were about to face the unknown, and whatever came next, they would face it together. I know you're excited to continue, but before we dive into part 5, please make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us as we bring you more thrilling stories. Your support means the world to us. And where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. We love hearing from all of you. Now, let's dive back into the adventure. As they moved deeper into the abandoned settlement, the unsettling silence grew heavier. The ruins around them, once signs of a thriving community, now stood as decaying monuments to a forgotten past. Zara led the way, her senses alert, her every step calculated. Jack, close behind her, could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Something was wrong, but he couldn't place it. The silence was too complete, too still. It wasn't natural. Suddenly, Zara stopped, her hand held out behind her, signaling Jack to halt. Jack froze, his eyes scanning the dark, damp corners of the crumbling structures. In the distance, a faint sound echoed, almost like a whisper carried on the wind. He strained to hear it. It came again, this time louder, closer. A soft, scraping sound. It was too deliberate to be the wind, too sharp to be the usual noises of a jungle or forest. Something, or someone was here. Zara's hand tightened around the grip of her weapon, her movements slow, deliberate. Jack followed her lead, instinctively drawing his own rifle, ready for whatever came next. "Stay close," Zara whispered, her voice barely audible over the soft patter of rain. She began to move forward again, her eyes scanning the shadows. Jack kept his eyes locked on her, moving silently behind her, his senses heightened. Every creak of the building, every rustle of the overgrown vegetation, felt like a warning. Then, without any more warning, a shape appeared from the shadows, moving quickly toward them. Zara reacted instantly, raising her weapon and firing in one fluid motion. The blast of her rifle lit up the dark, momentarily blinding Jack. As the smoke cleared, the figure on the ground was unmistakably human. A man, lying unconscious but alive, his body battered and bruised. Zara cursed softly, her eyes scanning the area for others. "Not alone," she muttered. Jack crouched next to the man, quickly assessing the situation. He wasn't armed, and there were no immediate signs of danger. But the condition of the man told Jack everything he needed to know. He had been beaten, possibly tortured, and left for dead. The look in Zara's eyes was one Jack had seen before, cold, calculating, but beneath it, there was something else. Something that suggested she knew exactly who this man was. "You know him," Jack said, a statement more than a question. Zara didn't answer immediately, her gaze fixed on the unconscious figure. She seemed to hesitate, just for a moment, but it was enough for Jack to know he had hit a nerve. "His name's Kael," Zara finally said, her voice low. "He was part of my squad. We were sent to this planet years ago on a covert mission, but it went wrong. Real wrong. Kael, he was the last one left after the rest of us were ambushed. We got separated, and I thought he was dead." Zara's expression hardened as she looked at Kael. Jack could see the flicker of emotions crossing her face. Emotions she wasn't ready to share, but there they were, brief glimpses into a past she'd buried deep. "What happened to him?" Jack asked, his voice steady but his curiosity piqued. Zara's eyes narrowed, her jaw tightening. "He betrayed us. He was the one who led the ambush. I was the only one who got away. The rest of my squad, they didn't make it." Jack felt the weight of her words. Betrayal, survival, loss. It was clear that Zara had never fully recovered from that day, and now, standing in front of her, was the very man who had shattered everything. Kael groaned, his eyes fluttering open. He looked up, his gaze unfocused at first, but then his eyes locked on Zara, and for a moment, the shock in his eyes mirrored the same realization that Jack had. Zara didn't flinch. She stood tall, her rifle still aimed at him, but her face was unreadable. "You left me to die," Zara said, her voice cold, cutting through the air like a blade. Kael's lips parted, but no words came out at first. When he finally spoke, his voice was weak, ragged. I didn't want to." His words trailed off as his eyes drifted to the weapon in Zara's hand. Jack could see the hesitation in Kael's gaze, the fear, the regret. He wasn't the man who had betrayed them anymore. He had become a shell of who he used to be. "I'll leave it to you, Zara," Jack said, his voice steady. "What do you want to do with him?" Zara hesitated, her finger hovering near the trigger. There was a long, tense silence before she spoke. "We need him," she said simply. "He knows the layout of the planet, the mercenaries who control it. If we're going to get what we came for, we need him alive." Jack nodded, understanding. This mission wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about revenge, justice, and something far more personal than either of them had expected. Zara's past had come rushing back, and now it was up to both of them to face it head-on. They weren't just fighting for a mission anymore. They were fighting for their own redemption, and Kael was the key to unlocking it. The tension in the air was thick as Zara stood over Kael, her weapon still aimed at him, the weight of the past hanging heavy between them. Jack watched, unsure of what to say, the atmosphere charged with unresolved emotions. Kael, now conscious, struggled to sit up, his body weak, his movements sluggish. His eyes, once full of confidence and betrayal, now reflected a mixture of regret and fear, as if the man he once was had been replaced by someone unfamiliar. "Zara," Kael croaked, his voice barely more than a whisper. "I'm sorry. I never wanted to leave you. I was forced." Zara's gaze never wavered, her fingers still resting on the trigger, but she didn't shoot. She simply stared at him, as if trying to gauge the truth in his words. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft hum of the rain and the occasional crack of distant thunder. "Forced," Zara repeated, her voice a mix of disbelief and bitterness. "You were forced to betray your entire squad? You were forced to leave me to die?" Kael's face twisted. In pain, both physical and emotional. "I didn't have a choice," he said, his voice cracking. "I was part of a bigger plan. They promised me freedom, promised to spare my family. I didn't know what else to do." Zara took a step forward, her eyes never leaving his. "And you thought betraying your team was the answer?" Kael closed his eyes, the guilt washing over him. "I thought I could make it right later, but I was wrong. I didn't think you'd survive, Zara. I didn't think any of us would." His words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of the decision he had made years ago, a decision that had cost him everything. Zara stood there, her emotions conflicted. She had every right to hate him, to make him pay for what he had done, but something in his voice made her hesitate. Kael had been a friend once, a comrade, someone she had fought beside. To see him like this, broken and remorseful, stirred something in her, something she hadn't felt in a long time. "What do you want from me, Kael?" she asked, her voice quieter now, though still edged with pain. Kael opened his eyes, meeting her gaze, and for the first time since he had woken, there was a glimmer of hope in his expression. "A chance," he said, his voice steadying. "A chance to make things right. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm not the man I was. I can help you, Zara. I know the mercenaries. I know the routes, the safe houses, the key players. You need me." Zara hesitated, the weight of his words sinking in. She had never expected this, never expected Kael to offer her anything other than lies and betrayal. But now, here he was, broken and offering something she couldn't refuse, his knowledge. As much as she wanted to deny it, they needed him. They had come too far to let personal grudges get in the way. "Fine," she said, her voice sharp, but with a new sense of purpose. "You're not off the hook, Kael. You'll prove to me that you've changed. If you do, maybe, just maybe, I'll give you a chance to make up for what you've done. But you won't get a second one." Kael nodded, relief flooding his features. "I understand. I won't let you down, Zara." Jack, who had been silent throughout this exchange, finally spoke up. "We don't have time for long discussions," he he said, his tone practical, a reminder of the mission at hand. We need to move. The longer we stay here, the more likely we'll be discovered. Zara gave a quick nod, her eyes still locked on Kael, but there was a flicker of something else in her gaze, something close to acceptance, if not forgiveness. Get up, she ordered, her voice firm. We move now. Kael struggled to his feet, his body weak but determined, and the trio began to move through the ruins, their path now aligned, if only temporarily. As they made their way toward the mercenary stronghold, the sounds of the storm still raged overhead, but Jack could sense that Zara's mood had shifted. She wasn't just driven by the mission anymore. She was driven by something personal. She was finally facing the ghosts of her past, and for the first time, she wasn't alone. Kael had returned, and whether he was a burden or an ally, that remained to be seen. But in this moment, Jack knew they were one step closer to their goal, and whatever it took, they would reach it together. The past had been unearthed, and now, they would face whatever came next as a team. The journey through the ruins was tense, the only sound the crunch of their footsteps on the damp ground, the distant rumble of thunder shaking the air above them. Zara, Jack, and Kael moved in a tight formation, each of them aware that they were entering enemy territory, a place where survival was uncertain. As they reached the edge of the settlement, Zara stopped and held up her hand, signaling them to crouch low. Jack mirrored her actions, crouching behind a broken wall, his eyes scanning the area ahead. The landscape had changed since they first arrived. What had once been a derelict ghost town now felt alive with danger. The tall, jagged rock formations around them formed a natural barrier, but the openness of the plain offered little cover. This is it, Zara whispered, her voice low but steady. The mercenary stronghold is just beyond the ridge. We move fast and quiet from here on out. Kael, stay close. Kael, though visibly weakened, nodded and tightened his grip on the makeshift weapon Zara had given him. He didn't speak, but the haunted look in his eyes suggested that this was the moment he had been dreading, the moment he had to face the consequences of his past actions. The three of them moved forward, crouching low, using the broken buildings and scattered debris for cover as they made their way towards the ridge. Jack kept his rifle ready, his eyes constantly scanning for any signs of movement. They couldn't afford to make a mistake. Every step they took brought them closer to the mercenaries who controlled this land, the very mercenaries Zara had once fought beside and, in some cases, against. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay, the remnants of a long-forgotten conflict that still lingered in the shadows. The deeper they moved into the ruins, the more Jack could feel the weight of history pressing down on them. He glanced at Zara, who moved like a shadow, her expression unreadable, but Jack could sense the tension in her. This was personal for her, more than just a mission. The stronghold wasn't far now, and every step felt like it brought them closer to a confrontation neither of them was entirely prepared for. As they reached the final stretch, the ridge that would give them a clear view of the stronghold, Zara motioned for them to stop. She crouched down beside a large boulder, her eyes scanning the area ahead. Jack followed her gaze, his heart racing as he saw the camp in the distance. It was well fortified, guarded by armed mercenaries, their faces hidden behind helmets, their rifles slung over their shoulders. The settlement they had walked through was nothing compared to this, a heavily armed fortress in the middle of nowhere. Zara took a deep breath, her eyes narrowing. This is it, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. We'll need to move quickly, and we'll need to split up once we're in. Jack, you take the eastern perimeter. Kael, you go with me. We'll meet up inside. Jack nodded, his pulse quickening. The plan was simple. Get in, get the intel, and get out. But the reality of it was anything but simple. They were outnumbered, and every mercenary in that camp would be looking for them the moment they were discovered. Understood, Jack said. He turned to Kael, whose expression had darkened as he stared at the mercenaries ahead. You ready? Kael didn't respond right away, his gaze fixed on the stronghold, the weight of his past evident in his eyes. After a long pause, he nodded. I have to be. The three of them moved swiftly, using the shadows to their advantage, their movements a blur as they made their way toward the mercenary camp. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as he reached the eastern perimeter. His position was risky, but it was the only one that gave him a clear line of sight to the camp's entrance. He crouched low, using the rocks for cover, and waited for the signal from Zara. The rain had started to pick up again, masking the sounds of their movements. But Jack knew the window of opportunity wouldn't last long. Zara and Kael were still making their way toward the camp, and Jack could feel the weight of the moment bearing down on him. If they didn't get inside soon, they would be trapped. Then, as if on cue, the signal came. A flash of movement from Zara, a subtle gesture indicating the plan was in motion. Jack moved quickly, his legs aching from the crouching position, but he pushed through the pain. He had a job to do, and there was no turning back. As he neared the entrance, he could hear the voices of the mercenaries, their conversation muffled by the storm. He knew they were close. They were almost inside. Then, suddenly, a shot rang out, piercing the air. Jack froze, his heart skipping a beat. He turned just in time to see one of the mercenaries turn toward the sound, his eyes scanning the area. Jack held his breath, praying that he hadn't been seen. The mercenary turned back, none the wiser, and Jack exhaled slowly. He wasn't sure how much longer they could keep this up. They had to move fast, before the entire camp realized they were there. The storm raged around them, but for Jack, the real battle was just beginning. The tension was suffocating as Jack moved deeper into the mercenary stronghold. His heart raced, his breath quickened, and every muscle in his body screamed for him to stay alert. He couldn't afford to make a mistake. Not now, not when they were so close. Zara and Kael had gone in from the other side, and Jack's job was to provide cover, to make sure nothing went wrong. The camp was alive with activity, the mercenaries shouting orders to one another, unaware of the intruders hidden among them. Jack could feel the weight of their presence, like a pulse in the air, heavy with danger. As he crept toward a shadowed corner, he spotted the entrance to the building where the intel was stored. It was guarded by two men, their rifles slung lazily over their shoulders, but Jack knew better than to assume they were careless. They might be relaxed, but they were still soldiers, and they wouldn't be so easy to take out. Jack held his breath, staying still, waiting for the right moment. His fingers tightened around his weapon as the two mercenaries stepped closer to the entrance, their voices low but tense. Just as they reached the door, Jack moved, his steps light but fast, closing the distance between them in a few swift seconds. A quick strike, a well-placed shot to the back of one man's head, and the first guard crumpled to the ground without a sound. The second guard spun around, his hand reaching for his rifle, but Jack was faster. He fired first, the blast hitting the mercenary square in the chest, knocking him back against the wall. Silence fell once again, the two guards lying motionless on the ground. Jack exhaled slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. He had to move fast. Zara and Kael were counting on him. He darted forward, slipping into the building and into the darkness. The interior was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of oil and machinery. The sound of distant voices echoed from the next room, but Jack didn't stop. He moved with purpose, his eyes scanning the walls for the access panel to the data system. It was locked, of course, but Jack was prepared. He quickly set to work, his fingers dancing over the control panel, overriding the security system with ease. In moments, the door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing the data terminal inside. Jack stepped into the room, his mind focused on the task at hand. He needed the intel, everything the mercenaries had on the upcoming operations, the routes, the safe houses, and most importantly, the mercenary leader. The clock was ticking. As he worked, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The camp felt too quiet, too still. There should have been more noise, more activity. His instincts flared, and he froze, his hand hovering over the data pad. Then, he heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching. Jack quickly backed away from the terminal, hiding in the shadows. His pulse raced, but he forced himself to stay calm, to blend into the darkness. The door to the room creaked open, and Jack held his breath. A figure stepped inside, silhouetted by the dim light, but Jack couldn't see their face. He didn't move, didn't make a sound. The figure stepped further into the room, seemingly unaware of Jack's presence. It was one of the mercenaries, a high-ranking officer by the looks of the insignia on his chest. He moved toward the terminal, his steps slow, methodical, as if he had sensed something was off. Jack's fingers itched to pull the trigger, but he knew better. One wrong move, and everything would be ruined. He needed the element of surprise. He waited. The officer reached the terminal, his eyes scanning the screen. Jack took a deep breath, steadying his nerves. It was now or never. With a quick, silent motion, Jack stepped out of the shadows, his rifle raised. He fired, the shot echoing through the room, and the officer dropped to the ground, lifeless. Jack exhaled slowly, his heart still racing. But there was no time to savor the victory. He had the intel, and now it was time to find Zara and Kael. He moved quickly, retracing his steps through the stronghold, staying low, staying quiet. He found them in the back of the camp, Zara standing over a group of mercenaries, her weapon in hand, while Kael looked on, his face grim but determined. Jack's eyes flicked to the data pad in his hand, the information they needed now securely in his possession. Zara turned toward him, a brief flash of recognition in her eyes. "Did you get it?" she asked, her voice steady but filled with expectation. Jack nodded, holding up the pad. "We're good to go? It's all here." Zara's expression softened for just a moment, but it was enough to show Jack that she appreciated what he had done. She didn't say anything else, but her eyes said it all. They had done it. They had gotten what they came for. But there was still one final hurdle to cross. The mercenaries had noticed their presence, and they were closing in fast. "We need to move," Jack said, his voice urgent. "Now." Zara didn't hesitate. She turned on her heel and led the way, Kael and Jack following close behind. The storm outside had intensified, the rain coming down in sheets, but they didn't stop. The mercenaries were hot on their trail, but Zara, Kael, and Jack had one advantage: their will to survive. Together, they fought their way through the camp, evading enemy fire, making their way back to the ship. And as they reached the edge of the stronghold, Jack knew that this mission, this partnership, was far from over. But they had done the impossible, they had survived, and now, they had the chance to turn the tide in their favor.